Good evening, everyone. We're excited to start our Bold and Gold virtual orientation. I'm going to give folks another minute or so to log on, and then we'll get rolling, okay? All right, let's get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Carly Andrews. I am Bold and Gold Summer Program Director. I'm excited to connect with you all this evening to learn a little bit more about Bold and Gold and what it looks like to go on a trip with us. The Bold and Gold team, some of which whom you will hear from today, have been really busy preparing for this summer, and we want to provide you with information that you will need to prepare as well. Please note that this orientation only covers Bold and Gold programs. If your young person is signed up for a Camp Orkyla or a Camp Coleman program, those programs will do separate orientations that you'll be receiving information about via email. A note for some general logistics, as we progress through the presentation, please use the question and answer function. And if you have any questions, and we will address them during the question and answer portion of the presentation. With that, I'm going to start us off with a land acknowledgement, which will be on our next slide. So this quote is from David Booridge, and it says, "For 500 generations they flourished until newcomers came. Much was lost, much was devalued, but much was also hidden away in the hearts of the dispossessed." And this is an excerpt from Native Americans of the Pacific Northwest. I would like to acknowledge that I live and work on the ancestral lands of the Coast Salish peoples, and our Bold and Gold adventures will explore the lands of the indigenous people of the Pacific Northwest, which are now designated as national parks and other public lands. These lands have been and continue to be stewarded by Native communities, and it is incumbent upon us to be mindful of this and be good stewards of the land. When we are on our trips, we will practice leave no trace principles to protect these natural spaces while we play, learn, and grow together. And I'm going to pass it over to Troy, who will share our equity statement for the Y of Greater Seattle.
Hi, everybody. The equity statement of the Y of Greater Seattle is a driving force behind Bold and Gold and all the things that we do. We are dedicated to removing barriers to our curated experiences. So I'm going to read that statement for you all right now. The Y actively promotes a culture free from bias and injustice. We are dedicated to removing institutional and systemic barriers that result in oppression and racism. We will be accountable to marginalized communities for creating equitable and sustainable environments where social justice is woven into every facet of our programs, and by caring for our communities in a culturally versatile and respectful manner. Now I'm going to pass it over to Kayla.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Kayla. I am the Bold and Gold Partnership Program Director. Really excited to be here and support our summer programs. A quick overview of what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk a little bit more about Bold and Gold and why we do what we do. You're going to meet more of our summer staff, some that are on this video call as well. We're going to talk about how to prepare for your adventure, some of the risk management that goes into all of our programs, what to expect on your trip, for your trip, after your trip, talk a little bit more about our admissions packets, and then one of my favorite parts are Q&A. So again, dropping those questions into the Q&A chat. And we'll talk a little bit more about our participant corner, which is available online for you to check out these resources and get some more information. Tonight's orientation is going to be recorded, so you can also access this online later today. Great. So a little bit more about YMCA, Camping and Outdoor Leadership. We are in the same branch of the YMCA as Camper Kyla, Camp Coleman. I'm gonna just move this up a little bit. There we go. So we are part of Outdoor Leadership, which is based out of South Lake Union in Seattle. Some programs out of our building are Bold and Gold Summer, Bold and Gold Partnerships, YMCA Earth Service Corps, and the Climbing and Challenge program. For Bold and Gold, we have been offering these amazing outdoor experiences for young people for over 15 years. We truly believe in the power of the outdoors as a tool to help all people develop confidence, courage, community awareness, emotional intelligence, and wonder. Our goal in all our programs is to intentionally bring together diverse groups of young people to develop their skills as leaders, build community, and challenge themselves. Awesome. And then next, I'm going to introduce some of the people that you will see tonight or this summer. Great. So Corin Eckley is our admissions manager. So someone who's maybe been answering some of the questions you maybe have. They also, will be there for check-ins for all your programs, talking about like medications and all the other necessary paperwork. Carly Andrews, who you already met, is our summer Bold and Gold director. So they've been getting all the permits, they've been doing staffing, they've been doing like all the major behind the scene things. So you'll see them this summer. Troy Donovan, who you've met, is our outdoor leadership's operations manager. So he's like ordering the food, making sure we have all the cool gear that you need to be comfortable outside. Jeff Esseltine, who's not able to make it tonight, is the director of outdoor leadership. So oversees all the amazing programs that we do in outdoor leadership. And then myself, Kayla Rosno, Bold and Gold Partnership Program Director. And I will pass it off to Carly.
Awesome. Thanks, Kayla. A huge part of our summer team who is not on this call are our seasonal wilderness instructors who help lead the trips that your youth will be on. So a couple of things about our trip leaders. These folks are professionals in their field. They do this for a living. For some of our instructors, they might be teachers, they might be outdoor educators, and they are experienced guides in the outdoors that are excited to work with participants and really share their love for nature on these trips. Some of our instructors are even former participants who have decided to pursue this work after a formative Bold and Gold experience. When I'm hiring these folks, we are looking for folks with outdoor experience and experience working with young people. And then they receive a variety of different trainings and credentials in order to safely facilitate these experiences. So all of our instructors have at least a wilderness first aid training, which is a 24-hour medical training that is specific to first aid when you're in the backcountry or in remote settings. And many of our instructors hold a wilderness first responder certification, which is an 80-hour medical certification, again, that is specific to first aid in more remote settings. They also hold CPR certifications as well as some general first aid. And then as part of their Bold and Gold experience, they attend a multi-week training that includes both technical skills as well as social emotional skills as part of that. On each trip, we have 2 leaders with up to 10 participants. And Kayla will be talking about our leader in training program because on some of our middle school trips, we will also have a leader in training on those trips. So Kayla, I'll pass it over to you to talk about our Leader in Training program.
Awesome. Hello. Thank you, Carly. So I also get the pleasure of being the Leader in Training program coordinator. Our LITs, like Carly mentioned, have all gone on a Bold and Gold trip. They have applied for this program, interviewed for this program, and before they go on a middle school trip, they also go on an LIT training trip, which is a week-long backpacking trip with 2 of our more veteran staff. On that training trip, they learn a lot of similar skills as our instructors, so a lot of like technical skills as well as a lot of mentoring skills, just to be able to help new participants really feel comfortable. On this mentor trip, the LATs, again, will join. So they might be that like 10th participant that you see on there. But yeah, many of them joined the LAT program because they went on a middle school trip and had a great experience and want to help foster that for the next generation of Bold and Gold participants. At the end of the LAT training trip and the end of the LAT mentor trip, all of the leader in training get 150 hours of community service. Through this program, we found a lot of leaders in training get some great references from the instructors that they work with. They also get a great boost on their college resume, and at the end of it all, they get 150 hours of community service. So very cool program. I'd be happy to talk with all of you more about. Great. So next I'm going to talk more about Bold and Gold curriculum. So kind of what to expect when you're maybe like not hiking or not climbing on your program. So most of our curriculum is leadership focused. We are, it's in our name, we are outdoor leadership development. Our goal with these programs, again, is to help everyone feel more confident, capable, and feeling just like more comfortable with their voice as a leader. So all of our instructors go through training that models our backpacking trips. So they get to participate in all these activities and games that your young person may see on their program. Each day on our program, everyone gets a group job, we call them, and kind of like a group chore or a group task. Some of those include being the leader of the day, which is one of my favorite roles, is when you get to work closely with the instructor. You kind of like help set the pace for the group. Maybe you like help choose like what snacks the group's going to have or when to take water breaks. And you might just like help the instructors with some like navigation and decision making skills along the way. Another group job that I really enjoy is being the chef. So learning how to cook delicious backcountry meals on our stoves. Another one is carrying around the group journal and getting to kind of write down what the group did that day. So you have this memento of what you did on the trip. And then the final one of the jobs you might see on yours is a photographer. So all of our Bold and Gold trips go out with these like really durable cameras. They're like waterproof, sandproof, reasonably distant drop proof, scratch proof cameras. So all of our trips have those, and all those photos get shared with everyone once the trip is done. So we do ask that you leave your own cameras at home, since ours are just like made to be outside, and then it gives everyone access to those pictures. So some other skills that you might also see on your program is learning how to do some map reading, learning more about compass if you're on the coast, learning more about like tide charts and how that looks in the coastal setting. You're learning how to set up our shelters. And then if you're on a backpacking trip, you're also going to learn how to like pack a backpack correctly and how to wear it in a way that is really comfortable for you. And then you can also, depending on your instructors and your interest, you can expect other lessons throughout the trip or other games. So sometimes we bring watercolors out there, different card games. And just a lot of other silly games that have fun names. And then at the end of every day, we come together as a group and do a courage circle. It's just a way for us to reflect on the day, come together as a whole group, and then also do an activity that just kind of talks more about ourselves and kind of about our leadership. Great. And so talking about the day, I'm going to kind of go through the flow of a typical day next. So a really cool thing with these trips, you are with the same group of people for the duration of your trip. So as a group, you kind of find this routine, this kind of natural flow of a day. So kind of depending on, again, where your trip is, if you have like tidal crossings or depending on like your day ahead, groups typically wake up, we'll say around like 7 a.m. Again, that can vary. You'll wake up, you'll have breakfast, which is usually something like granola and fruit or oatmeal or maybe a bagel. After breakfast, you'll break down your campsite if you're moving campsites. You'll pack your packs, you'll do a stretch break, usually play a quick game, and then start hiking on the trail to your next site. On most of our Bold and Gold backpacking trips, you're going to hike about 3 to 5 miles with your packs on, remembering the more food you eat and the longer you're out there, your packs do get lighter every day and you also get stronger. While you're hiking, you're also going to take breaks along the way. You're going to play a lot of fun games while you're walking. You'll also stop for a lunch on trail typically. Those lunches a lot of times contain tortillas. They can be like peanut butter and jelly or peanut butter and honey, or like cheese and summer sausage. Yeah, or like sometimes tuna packets, people like those. And if you have any questions about dietary, Troy will talk more about those later. All right, so now we've hiked on trail, we've had lunch, we've had snacks, we played games. Once you get to the campsite, you're going to take your packs off, relax, change shoes, set up your shelter. You're going to have a chance to like read your book, have a little bit of like solo time near the instructors, and then you'll start getting ready for dinner, maybe even have a dessert, clean up dinner, and then have that evening curd circle, which is again just a chance for everyone to come together as a group before you go to bed. But with that, there's one more thing I want to talk about on a typical Bold and Gold trip, which is rest days. See, so rest days happen on our, you'll usually get like 1 to 2 rest days per Bold and Gold trip. Rest days are days if you're backpacking that you're not moving campsites. If you're climbing, it's a day that you're not climbing. On your rest day, you can expect to maybe sleep in a little bit longer. Maybe you'll have a fancier breakfast, so something more like pancakes or cheesy hash are some of my favorites. Maybe you'll cook a more elaborate dinner, so maybe like pita pizza is my favorite on layover days. But on these rest days, you might take a little bit longer solo time. So if you have a book, this might be a time to like read your book a little bit longer. You might go on like a little day hike, or you might explore like a stream nearby, or kind of like splash in a lake nearby. But it's just a day to kind of like relax, stretch out your muscles, and just kind of like enjoy playing some games and hanging out with each other. Awesome. And then with that, I'm going to pass it off to Troy.
Hello again, everybody. I just want to touch on Leave No Trace real quick. This is something your young people will come back knowing more about. It's just a set of 7 principles in how to engage with the outdoors, surrounding around having as little impact on the space as possible. It's something we want to keep at the front of our minds, especially as a program when we're sending so many young people out into these same spaces. So we want to take out with us what we take in. And now let's talk about what we're taking with us in our gear and packing. So the packing list for all of these experiences you will find in your program's handbook, which should have been emailed to you already. The stuff that you need to bring is mostly just clothes and things like that, hats, shirts, pants, all those things. Main things we're looking for is that they're non-cotton. And you likely have a lot of these things on this packing list, and some of it you might not have, and that's totally fine. You don't need to go out and buy all these things. We have a vast gear library, and you can borrow all of that gear at 0 cost. Especially if you're a first-time backpacker, this is something that you're seeing if you enjoy. Don't go out and spend a bunch of money on gear, and then maybe you don't like backpacking. Maybe it's not for you. We don't want to waste our money like that. We have a lot of really cool stuff for you to borrow. And going on 1 to 2 week backpacking trips, your gear does get dirty and beat up, and I would much rather have you beat up our gear. That's why we have it. So you've compiled all the stuff that you want to bring on this trip. It's all packed up in a backpack or a duffel bag, and you're going to bring it to our Cascade People Center, which is where all our trips are going to start. And then our logistics team, along with our instructors, are going to do what's called a gear check. And that is when we're going to go through all of the stuff that you brought and make sure it is the appropriate thing for your trip, and it's what's going to keep you safe and comfortable while you're on this backpacking, climbing, or front country hiking trip. Some stuff we might ask you to bring behind, or maybe you just don't have a pair of hiking boots and you don't want to carry your shoes with you the whole time that you showed up with. That stuff that we're leaving behind is going to be locked up in a secure locker, and it will be safe. And when you get back, it will be there for you. It's just there waiting. Yeah. All of the technical gear like shelters and cooking equipment, pots, pans, all that stuff we have. You don't have to worry about any of that at all. Just focus on what's on that packing list in the handbook. And again, if you don't have any of that stuff, we have all of it for you. There is a gear request sheet that you can fill out in the paperwork to kind of forecast what you plan on borrowing, and that just helps us get a bit of knowledge about what kind of sizes of clothes and things that we need to have ready when you show up on site. I will say the packing list, if you don't have all the stuff, that's fine, but we don't want you bringing more stuff than what is on the packing list because we're carrying everything on our backs for the backpacking trips. We want to try and keep our backpacks light, and that's why we have kind of dialed in that packing list to keep everybody comfortable as we're walking through those 3 to 5 miles. Even a little bit of weight starts to add up. So be really aware of what you're putting in that packing list. Sleeping and personal hygiene. So you can see in this picture, these are what are called mids. These are the shelters we use on most of our trips. So that's what you'll be sleeping in. So we put 3 to 5 participants in there, and they are an open air structure. So they don't have a bottom. That helps cut out a little bit of weight. And you get a little tarp to put under you to keep you separate from the ground. So those sleeping arrangements are separated by gender. Occasionally when we get number splits in our trips, we send out what are called the venture tarps, which are just large, lightweight tarps that the entire group sleeps under as a whole. Personal hygiene on our trips, we don't have showers. It's really tough to carry a shower around with you. So we use natural showers like lakes and rivers and things. Things on our packing list that are super helpful are bandanas. We often use those and go into like sponge bath mode and like jump in the water, swim around, and then wrap it up with like a quick wipe down, and you feel way better after you get out of the water. Bathrooms at most of the sites that we go to are privies. And what that is essentially a hole in the ground with a toilet over it. A lot of them also have like an outhouse structure around that. That's where we go to the bathroom. If you're a human who menstruates, even if you're not planning on menstruating on the trip, going to a new place, being around a new group of people can often plan you to menstruate outside of your typical cycle. So bring those things with you to be prepared for that. We also have all sorts of menstrual supplies at the Cascade People Center, and we're ready to outfit you with those items as well. Let's talk about food. What will we eat? So we have worked really hard to bring together a lot of different food options that are going to be familiar to a wide range of people, and then kind of tweak them a little bit to make them lightweight and accessible in the backcountry. So you might see things like pizza, and the way that's different is we're eating it on a pita crust instead of your typical pizza crust. Burritos is like a fairly typical burrito meal, except we're using dehydrated refried beans just to take a little bit of weight out of that. And that's mostly for our backcountry trips that we're using those dehydrated foods. Our front country programs like our Tahoma trips and our Sea to Summit trips, those trips get a big cooler full of ice, fresh vegetables, meat, if you eat meat. So our food options are a little bit wider on those trips just because we don't have all that weight to think about when we're carrying all those things around with us. If you have dietary restrictions, please make sure that's getting into the forms you fill out. That way I get it and my logistics team can plan ahead, go out, buy all the food that your young person needs to be happy, full, and successful and have all the energy they need to do the things that we do on our trips. If you have concerns about us meeting those needs, reach out to Camp Info. They'll connect you with me. I'm happy to talk to you, walk through what we've done in the past, and make a plan to make sure your young person is happy and healthy on this trip that they're going to go on. And with that, I will pass it off to Carly to talk about risk management.
Great. Thanks, Troy. All right, I'm excited to connect a little bit more about our extensive risk management strategies that Bold and Gold has in place. There are many strategies that we use in order to create redundancies in our program and add in additional support. Some of those include an emergency action plan that guides our responses, site-specific emergency information that is sent out with instructors on trips to ensure that we have the resources we need to quickly address issues, and a 24/7 on-call system that includes both medical and mental health advisors. So the first layer of our risk management really is training. So as I mentioned earlier, our instructors are all trained in wilderness first aid, with at least one instructor on each trip trained as a wilderness first responder. In addition to wilderness medicine, our staff take part in our Bold and Gold training, and that includes child abuse prevention, technical wilderness skills, and some risk management pieces that are both a general overview and our policies and procedures, as well as kind of talking through the specific decision making and judgment processes that come through leading these types of trips. The second layer of our risk management strategy includes check-in calls. So each trip that is in a remote area will have a satellite phone with them, and instructors are able to use this to connect with us back at base camp. They have scheduled check-in calls each week throughout the week, and we mostly use those to monitor the general health and well-being of the group. And so part of that is doing daily check-ins. Instructors will do daily check-ins with participants to see how they're doing. Do they have any blisters? Checking in about how they're feeling as part of the group, and making sure that everyone is feeling good with kind of where they're at. And then this really allows us to proactively address issues such as blisters or headaches or an upset stomach, as well as anxiety or homesickness or other things that might come up with these programs. With the scheduled satellite phone check-ins, that allows us to then kind of, in Seattle, keep track of those items and follow up with groups and give additional resources as needed to them. The third layer that we use in our risk management system is field resources. So when we say field, we mean like when people are out and about in the world on their trips. And so when our trips are out in the field, most of them will be out of cell service and some distance away from services. So again, to ensure we can communicate, each group carries a satellite phone, or they are operating within cell phone reception and would have that. With those scheduled check-in calls, they are able to receive weather updates, confirm logistics, as well as to provide us back in Seattle updates. And so that's a really crucial link to with our groups, and it's designated for staff use only. In addition to the satellite phone, each group does carry an extensive first aid kit that contains basic supplies, over-the-counter medications, and epinephrine. One thing to note about that is while you are filling out the health camp care info form, please make sure that you look through those over-the-counter medications. These are not something that instructors give out like willy-nilly, but it is really important that when instructors are, like when youth need medications, that they're able to have the permission from you to give them. So know that that's something that we often will check in with families if we notice something isn't if a certain medication, over-the-counter medication isn't checked, we might follow up with you about that, especially if it's something that might be necessary, such as epinephrine. Finally, we have base camp resources available. So in the event that there is an incident or an accident in the field, instructors will use their satellite phones to connect with our on-call system. And we have a seasonal leadership team called course directors, as well as our full-time staff team, who will work with the group in the field to provide support, develop a plan, and address the issue. I also want to highlight that really families are an important resource for us and part of our risk management system. If a young person is struggling on a trip, our course directors may reach out for advice or tips on how our instructors can best support them. you know your teens best, and we want to do everything that we can in order to ensure a successful and enjoyable experience for them. And then a quick note as on COVID in general, like health policies. We do follow COVID-19 guidance by Washington State Department of Health. And over the years, we've noticed that many of the practices that our community has put into place to reduce the risk of COVID, including small groups, a commitment to hygiene, and spending time outdoors, are really fully ingrained within our programs. Instructors work hard to teach youth how to take care of themselves outdoors. So kind of as Troy was talking about with those health and hygiene pieces, like reminding folks to wash their hands and being really thoughtful about like having the systems to set up in order to do that, even when we aren't using bathrooms in the traditional sense of having like running water. And that all groups do take soap into the field with them, and they also have ways to wash dishes and make sure that they're able to keep themselves and each other nice and healthy. So we do want to recommend, if folks are not feeling well before their trip, that they stay home and connect with our admissions team about maybe transferring their reservation to another trip, just because we are working and living in such small groups. It's not very fun to go backpacking when you're not feeling well, and so we want to make sure that folks are staying nice and healthy as much as possible. And with that, I believe it's next up for me to talk about some of the different places that we go. So most of our programs are in the national parks in Washington State. And so Olympic National Park is one of the main ones that we send 1 and 2 week long backpacking trips on. So these are what we call backcountry trips. They are remote, where participants and staff are carrying all of the items they need for the week on their back in a big backpack. These are trips such as Olympic Coastal Backpacking, Olympic Challenge, Backpacking and Leadership on the Olympic Coast, as well as Heart of Nature, which is actually in the Olympic interior. So Seattle is I guess I don't have access to this thing. Seattle is over on the right side of that photo. And then Olympic National Park is on the Olympic Peninsula. So it's almost directly west of Seattle. Most of our trips in Olympic National Park are along the Olympic coast. So it's this teeny tiny skinny section of that dark green that's right along the Pacific Ocean. The only trip that we currently have scheduled for the Olympic interior, which is the big blob of dark green, is called Heart of Nature, and that's a 2 week long backpacking trip. Some things to know about Olympic National Park is with the Olympic coast, these are really wild and beautiful areas where the land meets the sea. A lot of these trips are hiking over sand, they're hiking over boulders, and along forest paths. They're also tide pooling and hiking with the tide. A really incredible space. I always say it looks like Jurassic Park. And our groups are going to areas where not many people get to see. They're kind of hard to get to. And so it's really fortunate that our groups are able to head out there and experience that beauty. Heart of Nature is a trip that goes into the Olympic interior, and that explores a southern section of the park, going from it's called Staircase to Graves Creek, and really taking in a spot called Enchanted Valley, which is, I'd say, exactly what the name sounds like, really enchanting, quite beautiful. I'd say the last unique thing to note about Olympic National Park is we have a really wonderful relationship with the park rangers there. And for most of our trips, a park ranger will actually hike in to meet our groups and connect with them so that they can kind of see a park ranger doing their thing. And so if your youth is going to Olympic National Park this year, tell them to look out for Ranger Mel. She'll probably come by and say hello. The next park that we visit most frequently is called North Cascades National Park. So from Seattle, if we go northeast, just about up to Canada, there is a beautiful space, and it's actually one of the country's least visited national parks, which is kind of fun. The trips that are in North Cascades National Park are Peaks and Creeks, Cascade Challenge, Taste of Adventure, Call of the North Cascades, backpacking and fishing trips, and the Leader in Training trips, as well as American Alps. So with these trips, many of our middle school trips will spend time backpacking around Ross Lake. So similar to Olympic National Park, these are what we call backcountry trips, where the groups are backpacking, carrying a heavy backpack with all of their stuff on their backs for the week or 2 weeks. Most of our middle school trips go around Ross Lake, which is this lake that's the furthest north, kind of surrounded by that yellow piece, and it says Ross Lake National Recreation Area. Some of our trips head up to the high country, so a little bit higher elevation, and explore the passes and lakes there. That's where our backpacking and fishing trips go, as well as our Cascade Challenge and American Alps trips. And then other trips spend time walking through beautiful forests and along creeks. So our Taste of Adventure trips and our Peaks and Creeks trips are great examples of those ones. North Cascades is about 3 hours away from Seattle, and so it's a little bit of a shorter drive than the Olympic Coast, and so a lot more mountains and streams as opposed to beaches and oceans that they're seeing. The next national park that we head to is Mount Rainier National Park. So we only have one type of trip that goes to Mount Rainier, and those are our Tahoma trips. Our Tahoma trips are what we call front country experiences, and so they are doing staying actually at a YMCA property called Mineral Lake, which is brand new to the Y. We're the only programs that get to use it, which is pretty fun. And so that is staying around a property. It's in Mineral, Washington, so right outside of Mount Rainier National Park. And then the trips will do day trips into Rainier National Park to explore those areas. So the beautiful thing about these programs is that they are get to set up their camp and stay in the same spot for a couple of days. So they're not setting up and taking down their camp every day. And they get to really explore and kind of be part of that planning process as they decide what types of hikes they want to go on and where they want to go and kind of what they want that experience to be. I think while all of our trips are great introductions to the outdoors, Tahoma trips are really wonderful ways to explore beautiful natural areas, especially if folks are maybe a little bit hesitant about camping or concerned that maybe backpacking might be a little too challenging to start off with. All right, and the last kind of public land that I'll talk about is not actually a national park. Our front country climbing trips, or Sea to Summit trips, head to a spot called Mount Erie, which is just outside of Anacortes, Washington, so about an hour and a half north of Seattle. And these trips, similar to Tahoma trips, are front country camping. So they set up camp at Bayview State Park, and then each day they hop on their minibus and they drive in to Mount Erie to do some rock climbing. With these trips, they'll learn basic climbing techniques and how to belay, and then they might even get to do a rappel at the end of the week, which is what this person is doing on the right picture there. And that's something that's managed by our instructors, but participants get to lower themselves down a rock area there. Mount Erie has beautiful views of the San Juan Islands, and it's another great introduction to the outdoors if folks are excited to try out climbing for the first time, or maybe hone in on their climbing techniques that they already have. With that, I will pass it over to Corin to hear a little bit more about what to expect in the preparation parts of these programs.
I am going to be talking about what to expect in the coming time leading up to your trip. So most folks have probably already registered for their trip. If not, you can still definitely register or have friends join you on your trip. And then recently we've sent out the forms for this year. So your camper care info forms, your gear request forms, and a handful of other waivers to be signed. And also the handbooks are out as well. You can find those on our participant corner, and we've also dropped them in the Q&A chat. So what that looks like is before the trip, and actually kind of as soon as possible, we would love for you all to get your forms completed and submitted to us. We actually use all of that information to kind of help build the trip curriculum, and then also use the dietary needs to plan the meals for the trips. One example of this is if a participant writes down on their participant questionnaire that they really are into astronomy, our instructors can bring out some star charts or things like that. So we can tailor some of those activities based on what we know about our participants ahead of time. We'll have both participant questionnaires and caregiver questionnaires just to gather some more insight on the folks that will be going on these trips. About 2 weeks prior to each trip, we'll be sending out the welcome letters that will have the designated check-in and pickup times, along with instructions on how to get to our site. So 1 to 2 days before your participant's trip, the instructors will go ahead and give you all a call. They'll want to talk to both the participant and to the caregivers. They're mostly just want to introduce themselves and see if you all have any questions that haven't yet been answered. They'll talk to the participant, see how they're feeling about their trip. Are they super excited? Do they have some concerns? Do they have gear questions? Any last minute dietary questions, and just letting the participants know what to expect on the trip. They'll then talk with the caregivers and, just verify if there's been any medication changes since the forms have been filled out. Double check if there's any gear that they're needing to borrow ahead of time. The instructors will also be reminding caregivers that participants will need a sack lunch for their first day. And then just answer any other questions and give you an idea of what to expect for the trip. All of our trips start and end at the Cascade People's Center, which is located in the Cascade neighborhood in South Lake Union, very close to the flagship REI. As I mentioned earlier in your welcome email about 2 weeks before the trip, you will be giving your check-in time. Typically, our check-ins are going to be at 8 or 9 a.m. in the mornings, typically on Saturdays and Sundays. And then pickup from our trips is at 4:30 on the pickup day. At check-in, you will sign in, you'll check in any medications, and then we'll have an opening circle with caregivers and families. We ask that if families are able to stay for the opening circle that they can. We'll just be going over more information about the trip, where they're headed, bring out some maps, and answer any kind of last minute questions. And then the participants will say goodbye to their families. They'll head inside and do a gear check to make sure they've got everything they need. In terms of medications, all participant medications, supplements, and vitamins do need to be checked in, whether they are prescribed medications or over-the-counter medications or even supplements or vitamins. We want to make sure that everybody has enough of their medication to last the entire length of the trip, and all of the medications and supplements and vitamins do need to be in the original packaging or bottle, and it needs to not be expired. And if it's a prescription medication, it does need to have the name of the medication, the dosage, all of that good stuff. So if there's been any changes in medication, please do make sure to have the updated prescription from the provider. If participants use something like an inhaler or an EpiPen, they should ideally bring 2 if they have them, and then they are able to carry one, or if they prefer the instructors carry those, we can do that as well. We do still need to have those medications turned in at check-in just to make sure we have all the paperwork properly on there. And then again, making sure that folks have a sack lunch for their trip for the first day. And then at the end of the trip at 4:30, we'll have a closing circle again with ideally all of the families are present there. We'll talk about what they did on their trip. They will share possibly some fun memories. Sometimes the participants will do a skit or some other fun something for the families to watch and learn about what they did. At our closing circles, it will be important. This year we will be having claim checks. So when you check in, you will get a claim check, and then you'll need to bring that back to pick up your participant. If you don't have that claim check, or if it went through the wash or whatnot, that's okay. We will be checking photo IDs, but if you have that claim check, it will make that checkout process a little bit quicker. Again, that checkout circle is going to be at 4:30, and then you can plan to be leaving by about 5 o'clock. Are there any questions? We're going to have Jen help us moderate the Q&A.
There are some questions. I've got 2 questions for Troy. Troy, the first question I have for you is on the backpacking and fishing in the North Cascades trip. Do campers need to bring their own fishing poles?
They do not need to bring their own fishing poles. We have plenty of fishing poles that we send out with the groups. If you do have a fishing pole that you're really connected to, you can bring it if you want, but I always push people towards using our gear because if you're going out in the backcountry for a week, there's always risk of it coming back broken, and I would much rather you break our stuff than your stuff.
Perfect. And then I have another question about gear. We have a participant who has experience in the backcountry and has already owns a down sleeping bag, wondering if it's put in a waterproof stuff sack, if that is something that can be brought, or if they still need to have a synthetic bag.
That is, I always recommend using a synthetic bag. It has better insulative properties when it gets wet. I do also understand the merits of a lighter down bag. That is something I would bring with you to that gear check. You can have a conversation with the instructors once we have more clarity on what the weather is going to look like, and we'll make that call then. And again, if we decide at the gear check that it's not the right tool for that week, if there's a forecast of rain, it would be locked up and safe until you got back.
Perfect. The next question I have is really for anybody. What phone number will the instructors be making their pre-screening phone calls from?
I do not know the answer to that one.
There might be a few phone numbers that they're calling from, depending on what phones are available at the Cascade People Center. If you miss a call about 2 days before, you can always call that number back. Oh, let's see. Carly might have a better answer for us. Hold on one second.
Yeah, so all of our instructors are going to call from our Bold and Gold program line, which happens through computers. So it should show up on your caller ID as this number, but if it doesn't, then know that we'll have you call back, and the instructors would leave the number to call back. But that number would be 206-659-0231. We'll put that in the chat, but generally they are calling from Bold and Gold phone numbers, and that would be the number that they would have you call back if you missed their call. They are very used to getting voicemails, especially with phones that have caller ID screening, and so often they will leave a message or try calling back at a later time if they don't get you on the first try.
Thanks, Carly. I have some more packing questions. So we'll pass it back to Troy. Troy, can participants bring face wipes?
Typically, no. If you do have a skin condition or sensitive skin, that would be an exception that we make. A wet bandana does a very similar thing.
Perfect. Are ticks a problem at this time of year during our summer expedition timing? And if so, how is that managed?
When I was an instructor, I never ran into any ticks in the North Cascades in the summertime. We do send out bug spray with all of our trips, and that mitigates it to a certain extent. Yeah, I've never actually seen a tick in the North Cascades. Maybe I'm just really lucky.
For all of the trips, are they in and out hikes, or are they loops, or are there a mix of both depending on what trip you're on?
That's a Carly Q.
Yeah, I'd say it is a mix depending on the trip. Let's see, North Cascades, most of them, no, not necessarily. Backpacking and fishing trips and peaks and creeks trips are typically going to be some variation of an in and out trip, as well as most of the backpacking Olympic coastal backpacking trips. The Cascade Challenge programs, as well as the called the North Cascades trips, are ones where they make not necessarily a full loop, but they go in on one trailhead and out on a different trailhead. And so they will either be dropped off or picked up by a driver, or the groups sometimes will actually swap buses with another, which is some fun logistics that we work through. But really depends on the program. Most of the Olympic coast trips are kind of, again, starting at one end, ending at a different spot. But it kind of depends on the trip and just the itinerary that each individual one has. And so if you have specific questions about the itinerary, that's a great question to ask the instructors when they call in those days leading up to the trip.
Great. More gear questions. Back to Troy. These are great questions, but if folks are wanting to borrow gear, can they come a few days ahead of their trip to pick it up before they're packing?
I would say we typically hold off on that unless you're borrowing a lot of gear, which is totally fine. We can coordinate. If you reach out to Camp Info, they'll connect you with me and we can talk more about that. Yeah, we can make it happen.
For the Sea to Summit rock climbing trips, is all of the climbing equipment provided, or do they need to bring their own?
Yes, we provide all of the rock climbing equipment. We have shoes, harnesses, and helmets. We actually prefer if you don't bring your own harness and helmet, because that's safety equipment and we need to know the history of those items before we put them into use on our programs. It's fine if you bring your own shoes, but again, we have all the shoes, harnesses, and helmets, and that will be provided on our climbing trips.
All right. I think that's all of the questions that we have. Oh, there's one more. Sorry, I missed it. On the equipment list, it says that they need to have boots, and some say shoes. So some trip equipment lists will say that there are boots that are needed and some say shoes. There's a difference between the trips for like the mid to low. Troy, can you talk a little bit about the differences?
Yeah, so for our backpacking trips, we typically recommend a higher cut boot just because it provides a little more ankle support. You'll also see shoes on that packing list as well because we recommend you bring what we call camp shoes, and that's something for you to change out of your boots once we get into camp, and let your feet breathe a little bit more. So it can be like a sandal as long as it has a heel strap. Crocs are a really popular option for a camp shoe. Again, we have all these things here for you to borrow. For our front country trips like Tahoma and Sea to Summit, even the climbing trips like Sea to Summit, we are doing some hiking to approach the wall. So we want you to bring a hiking boot or shoe. It can be a lighter weight hiking shoe that's not as high cut because we're not carrying all that extra weight on our backs like we are for our backpacking trips.
Great.
Alrighty, so I think I'm seeing one more question about borrowing a backpack. Again, typically we do not have folks come ahead of time to get gear, but that is something we can specifically arrange. But if you don't have a hiking backpack, you can bring it in any sort of suitcase or container you'd like to bring it in. I've seen laundry baskets, I've seen school backpacks, rolling suitcases. Whatever you need to put your items in to bring them is fine. And then we will make sure everybody has a backpack at that gear check. If there are any further questions, feel free to contact us. Our email is campinfo@seattleymca.org. And we'd be happy to answer those questions. You can also scan the QR code that is on the screen right now, and that will take you to our participant corner, which has all kinds of helpful information in getting ready for your trip. All right, one last time, email us at campinfo@seattleymca.org if there are any additional questions. We are so excited to see you this summer for your trip, and we will be in contact with that welcome email. The instructors will be reaching out, and again, you can always give us a call or send us an email if you've got questions, and we would be happy to answer those. Thank you and have a great evening.